Chicago 1966, Nightmare for the Nurses. Chicago, summer of 1966. A bustling city where ordinary people lived peaceful lives. But on one July night, everything changed. A stranger entered a small house on East 100th Street, bringing darkness and death. 8 young nurses, on the brink of graduation with dreams of saving lives, became victims of one of the most horrifying crimes in American history. I'm your storyteller today, and I will take you back to that night, the night Chicago held its breath. Are you ready? July 13, 1966. The air was scorching hot. In Jeffrey Manor, on the south side of Chicago, 9 young nurses shared a 2-story townhouse, just a short walk from South Chicago Community Hospital. They were full of life and ambition: Gloria Davy, Patricia Matusek, Nina Schmale, and others, all preparing for their future careers. But that night, fate came knocking. Around 11 p.m., Corazon Amurao, an exchange nurse from the Philippines, heard a knock at the door. She opened it, and standing before her was a tall man with blonde hair and a southern accent. His name was Richard Speck, a 24-year-old drifter with a troubled past. He pushed his way in, a knife in his hand, and everything began to fall apart. Speck ordered the girls to gather in one room. He tore bedsheets into strips and bound their hands and feet. Over the next few hours, he led them out one by one. No one knew what was happening until it was too late. But one person escaped his sight: Corazon Amurao. Small and quick, she hid under a bed, holding her breath, waiting in the darkness. As the first light of July 14th broke through the windows, Speck left, leaving behind a house filled with silence and death. Corazon crawled out of her hiding place, and what she saw made her scream from a second-story window: "They're all dead. My friends are all dead." 8 young women were gone. That morning, Chicago stood still. Police arrived at the scene, and what they found was unimaginable. 8 young nurses, women who had dedicated their lives to helping others, lay lifeless throughout the house. No clear motive. No personal connection. This was something unheard of, a serial killer striking at random. The city fell into panic. People locked their doors. Young women were too afraid to walk alone. Corazon, the sole survivor, described the attacker, around 6 feet tall, blonde, with a tattoo on his arm that read "Born to Raise Hell." The biggest manhunt in Chicago history had begun. But Speck didn't go far. He hid in the city, drinking in cheap bars, living as if nothing had happened. He had no idea that every step he took was bringing him closer to his arrest. For 3 days after the murders, Chicago was like a pressure cooker. Police combed through every street, every rundown hotel. Then, a small clue emerged. On July 16, Speck rented a room at the Star Hotel, just a few miles from the crime scene. He attempted to end his life by slashing his wrists, but failed. The hotel staff called an ambulance, and he was taken to Cook County Hospital. And that's where Speck's fate changed. A young doctor, Leroy Smith, was working in the emergency room when he happened to glance at a newspaper. He saw the suspect's sketch and then looked down at Speck's arm. The tattoo read "Born to Raise Hell," just as Corazon had described. Smith immediately called the police. "I think we've found him." That night, police swarmed the hospital. Speck was arrested without resistance, his face cold, emotionless. But the story wasn't over yet. There were still questions waiting to be answered. Richard Speck went to trial in April 1967 in Peoria, Illinois. Corazon Amurao took the stand, pointed directly at him, and said, "That is the man who did it." Fingerprints at the crime scene matched Speck, and his own words in prison sealed the truth. He admitted everything, but with a strange attitude. I was drunk and lost control. Maybe I would have done it sober too. Speck was sentenced to death, but when the death penalty was abolished in 1972, his sentence was reduced to life in prison. He died of a heart attack in 1991 at the age of 49, never once showing remorse. But why did he do it? Some say he only intended to rob and lost control. Others believe the darkness inside him had been growing for years, fueled by a broken childhood, alcohol, and past violence. For Chicago, this case left a scar that never healed. It marked the end of an era when people still believed things like this couldn't happen. 8 young nurses were gone forever, but their story lives on in our memories. Corazon Amurao, the sole survivor, returned to the Philippines, living a quiet life, carrying the weight of that horrific night. And as for Speck? He left behind an unanswered question: what turns a person into a monster? Thank you for staying until the very end. Share your thoughts below. What do you think motivated Speck? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories. Until next time, stay safe when the night falls.